Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall Podcast. We are recording this episode about 20, 21 hours uh, after the verdict in the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial. Um, and, you know, a very historic moment. A lot, I think we can fairly say the whole country's attention sort of held in suspense, particularly for a few minutes, for a while yesterday afternoon. But in some ways, going on almost a year. I guess when the verdict came down, I was sort of a little jarred to hear that it had been 11 months. I was thinking, oh, maybe like 8 months. That was sometime during the summer or something like that. Well, it was a little longer ago, and we're a little further into the into this year.
Mhm.
As you know, Chauvin, it's funny. One of the weird things about this last year, and this is like the 110th most significant thing about this, but I realized before we started the episode that I have been so isolated from electronic communications, electronic media because of the pandemic. I basically don't watch any TV. I read a lot, but I was realizing I wasn't 100% sure precisely how to pronounce this guy's name. I know basically how to pronounce it. It's not like I've never heard it before, but I was just realizing again because everything for me is written media. So my probably like many of you, I was waiting for the verdict yesterday afternoon, um, with uh, great apprehension, both because of the significance and gravity of the case itself, and also because of the implications of different potential verdicts. And I had a my 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 reaction was mainly one of relief, more than anything else. Um, and it's a funny thing because when I did not watch the trial closely, didn't watch every moment of it, that kind of thing, but I did watch it, significant parts of it, and I was struck by how weak the defense was. Not that I thought there was a good defense to the charges, but I was struck by how weak the defense was. Um, at the same time, I think we all know, and I think that's what was behind a lot of the tension and apprehension yesterday. That often there are these cases where you know it seems pretty clear to a lot of people that something very wrong happened, and yet the police officers walk. There's back in God, almost 30 years ago now. Um, what in some ways was sort of the case of this, the although the dynamics were very different, the Rodney King case, and it's worth remembering that in the beating of Rodney King, of course, did not die as a result of this, although I believe he passed away a few years ago. Um, One of the things about that, it was this totally fortuitous and random and rare thing that some guy was using a camcorder in his apartment and happened to, that for you young people, not everybody it wasn't the case everybody had iPhones in the past, right? Or iPhones or all these different ways we record things. But defense attorneys have historically had a way of sort of breaking these video accounts down into their component parts. And that, you sort of zoom in on the trees to get away from the forest, as it were. And as I took the defense case, it was basically two-pronged. One was Floyd had drugs in his system, not acute levels of drugs, but drugs in his system. It sort of came out subsequently. He had struggled with opioid abuse. He had drugs in his system, and maybe he OD'd. Maybe he had a drug overdose, and it just kind of happened while he was being arrested. The problem with that was it seemed to be pretty clear-cut clinical evidence and clinical testimony that no, he died of asphyxia, leading to, I guess, cardiac arrest. And then the other argument was pretty straightforward. This was solid police work. This is what you're supposed to do. And there was, they had some police officers come on and say, well, no, that's not really the case. But what struck me is I don't think you can look at that video and say, yeah, rock solid. I mean, it's just, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. You can say a lot of things. You could make an argument that for various reasons, maybe Chauvin wasn't, criminally culpable. But I don't see how you look at that and say, yeah, that's textbook, by the book. That's how you do. I mean, that just makes no sense. And yet they did sort of make that argument and then show the video. And so I was in this kind of funny, funny state of apprehension and suspense, because especially after it came back that, relatively short deliberations, no questions to the judge. And I think, as we've seen, when these guys get acquitted, you usually see these questions to judge, where they're working over to, what is criminal culpability, stuff like this, no questions. And yet, again, as we know, these jury verdicts often shock us. And yet, it seems to have been pretty clear cut to the jury as well, especially when you figure that, every state has different versions of, gradations of homicide, from everything from, first degree murder, kind of like, I wanted to kill that person, I planned to kill that person, I killed the person, to things that are just negligence, like he kind of didn't care. And they didn't charge him with the first thing. No, there was the jurors didn't have to think like he wanted George Floyd to die. All that, they had 3 different charges, but they were all versions of, you just didn't care and you did something obviously very dangerous with indifferent to this man's well-being. And here we are. So it looks like I don't know, and it'll be interesting to see whether Chauvin has, kind of much of a shot on appeal here. Not clear to me how he would. I guess if I were a defense attorney, I'd probably make some kind of argument about fair trial. No one doesn't know this story. No one doesn't know that it led to days of protests and riot across Minneapolis, and then across the country, and then even around the world. So I was talking to someone yesterday about this, and this person saying, I think he was definitely guilty, but I'm not sure that's a fair trial. Because how could it be a fair trial? In the sense of, you're supposed to have jurors who kind of come at it with an open mind, who can have an open mind. But there we are. And I think it's, unquestionably good he was convicted, both because he's guilty, but also because of the larger context around this. I do wonder whether the way that, I said before how the defense just struck me as very weak. And I wonder if that was because a lot of the defenses that defense attorneys customarily use didn't seem available because of the sort of the changed perceptions of this whole issue. And what I mean is basically a kind of a scary black man defense, for lack of a better word, just didn't seem like it was not just palatable. No one's obviously that wouldn't go over well with the public, but defense attorneys don't care about the public. Trying to get an acquittal. Um, and so I wonder if that is, if that was part of it. That again, certain kinds of defenses just were not available to them, not legally not available. Just they knew it just wouldn't work. And I even had sometimes during the trial where I kind of thought, why didn't they try to take a plea? Because they they seem to have no defense here. And again, I'm not saying substantively do I think there's any defense. I'm saying legally they don't seem to have come up with anything. Uh, and yet, as we know, cops get acquitted all the time in cases when it really seems like they're rock solid guilty. You need to get every single member of the jury to convict. Probably also true that there probably wasn't much of a deal on offer. I mean, if you think about it, I think the state attorney general took over this prosecution, which Keith Ellison, former member of Congress, it's not like they were going to say, "Oh, plead out, and we'll, give you 2 years probation or something like that." That just was not. That was never going to happen. So maybe they didn't have an opportunity. In any case, sort of a somber, more different, bit of a different tone today's episode. So I'm just going to remind you, without reading through the copy, that our podcast is brought to you by Grady's Cold Brew Iced Coffee. It's a great product. Support our sponsors, and in this case, it's a twofer because it really is a great product, and you can support our sponsors and support us that way. And if you want to give it a try, you can get 25% off your first order at Grady'sColdBrew.com with promo code TPM. That's Grady'sColdBrew.com with promo code TPM. And you can also pick it up in, a lot of grocery stores and stuff like that. So, Kate, what do you think? What do you think after yesterday? Where
Yeah.
are you at?
I mean, I think emotionally I was in a similar state to you that, when the news came out that the verdict had been reached and we had, kind of a half hour window where we knew it was coming down, it just felt so real to me because we had been preparing for the verdict. Josh Kavinsky and I were kind of doing the prep work there to be ready for when it came down. But stuff like this, it could be weeks depending on if the jury agrees or if, even just one recalcitrant member can drag it out for days. And so I think when we found out the verdict was in, a mere 10, 11 hours after they started deliberating, you I mean, this kind of that dead air between when we know something and not know something is the worst time in media in general, I think, and this holds for presidential elections and all kinds of stuff like this. But, and I heard takes that were like, this is good for the defense. This is good for the prosecution, just all over the board. But, I'd watched the closing arguments of the trial very carefully and was kind of struck by, similar to what you were saying, the prosecution's argument could be so easily distilled down to one main thesis, which was trust your eyes. You've seen the video, you watched this man's life be snuffed out for 9 minutes straight. You're a human being. Is that murder to you? And then the defense, it just felt kind of like the legal equivalent of throwing a handful of spaghetti at the wall, which makes sense because, their job there is to sow as much doubt as possible to make sure the prosecution can't overcome the reasonable doubt hurdle. So it just, so much stuff got dragged into it. The drug stuff, as you say, Floyd's history with struggling with drugs, you know, different plausible medical musings. Maybe he died of heart failure at that exact time. Even stuff like bringing up carbon monoxide poisoning from his head's proximity to the tailpipe of the police car. And then, something I was surprised by is the defense showed a lot of video. And you would think that that video is bad for the defense, but they really tried to focus on what happened before Chauvin got there and kneeled on Floyd. So, he was struggling with police. They emphasized that was a big guy, and that they read out the dispatcher call that Chauvin responded to kind of gin up the idea that he was headed into an uncertain situation, which, to some degree, that's what police are always doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, the thing the thing there though, what really strikes me about this, and it's what's different. Remember that again, another horrific case and stunningly in the same city, Minneapolis,
Mhm.
the Castile killing, Flandreau Castile. And that one, it's again one of these horrifying but also kind of uncanny videos where, and it's, I believe, the video in that case is taken by his girlfriend, I believe, who was in the shotgun seat, next seat, he's in the driver's seat. And just to remind everybody, in that case, he had a legal gun in the car, and he told the police right up front, "I've got a gun. I've got a legal gun. It's in the glove compartment." And I think he went to get it, and he shot, right? And that's sort of that story. And what struck me in this case is many of these, I would say most of these cases, come down to these momentary decisions where the police officer says, "I was afraid. I thought I was in danger." And it's uh, at a basic level, I think we all agree that, man, we cannot all, our lives, or far more often, Black people's lives, can't be hanging by a thread by the sort of the momentary subjective thoughts of a police officer. Having said that, as a jury, it's hard to know what someone was thinking in a sort of a split second. You can't really know, and things are inherently subjective. And if you want to kind of, play devil's advocate in this case, police officer hears gun, sees the guy, who, it's hard to know with a certainty what was going through that person's head. And when you're talking about guilt and innocence, you really do need to focus in on that person's mental state at that moment, not the broader question of race and policing. In this case, though, it's precisely how long it went on. There's no one moment where you say, "God, I don't want to second guess the momentary decision he had to make about his life and his family and all that kind of stuff." You just say, like, "Wow, this guy is cuffed." I mean, what is he going to do, right? I mean, he's handcuffed behind his back, and he's immobilized by other people. But even if not, I mean, there's very little that someone who's handcuffed behind their back can do. And you're kneeling over his neck, and everybody, and there's those other videos. I guess they were actually the police camera videos of these bystanders saying, "Hey, I think you're going to kill him. I'm not sure he can breathe," and he's saying, "I can't breathe." And it's that thing, kind of like, there's no one moment. It's just, you just didn't care.
Mhm.
Like, you were just totally indifferent to what was happening to this guy. And again, what gets me and kind of points to the sort of the larger issues here is, it's not just him. There's three other police officers there. And like, I guess at one point, one kind of says, "Hey, is he still breathing?" Or kind of like, I think we should roll him over on his side. But none of them, and again, two of those guys are one biracial, uh, Nigerian and uh, white Caucasian parents, and another, I believe, was Hmong, Southeast Asian immigrants. And none of them said, dude, you got to get off his neck. Like, this is out of control. And so you just see it's not just that guy.
Mhm.
It's, and again, that lack of that is always the sort of the hold card for police, sometimes legitimately, of look, you have to make this momentary decision. And are you going to second guess someone's decision thinking their life was in danger, allegedly? And this is just not there.
Well, and I think that's potentially the most striking thing about this whole case is that it we had video of it, thanks to that 17-year-old girl who was on the scene, but it was, like you say, a protracted, he was kneeling on him for a long time. It's not like he was unaware that George Floyd was suffering, because he was saying that he was. And meanwhile, you also had bystanders, getting increasingly alarmed by it. And like you say, the other officers, even airing doubts about it. Um, not to mention the other pieces of this that's a big line for the prosecution was when someone's in your custody, they're in your care. Police officers are supposed to do, CPR, different kind of things until the paramedics get there. But, we have all of this evidence. And then we have the fact that during the trial, no one from the police department would come and kind of vouch for Chauvin and say that he did the right thing. And instead, you had the opposite. You had people in police organizations saying this is counter the training that they've received, like, all that kind of stuff. And even with all of that, the entire country was waiting with bated breath yesterday evening, waiting to see if that would be enough. So, it's like the immediate aftermath of this, I think, just felt basic relief at even the kind of logistically what comes next. Because I think if he had been acquitted, or maybe even not convicted on the murder charge, but just the lesser manslaughter charge, I mean, I think there would have been protests nationwide, and people were already so angry, and it was very emotional. And obviously nothing wrong with peaceful protests, but you're hyping up the potential for deadly conflicts with the police. But if that's the bar that we're at to get a successful conviction of an officer who killed someone, I mean, those are so many factors that came together in a way that made this case so indisputable. But, imagine if there hadn't been video, or if that video hadn't gone viral the way it did. A big thing on Twitter yesterday was people were sharing that initial
That original account. Yeah, I saw that. That was
from the
very striking.
Minneapolis police, which, said essentially there was an altercation, and the man involved had like a medical event and went to the hospital and died there. Which, can you imagine if that's what we were working off of?
It really was. I'm sure I saw that a year ago at some point, but it was striking to see it because, as you say, by that account, trying to arrest a guy, go out, standard arrest, trying to arrest a guy, he struggles, he has some medical event, they try to revive him, doesn't work out, and he died.
Right.
And he did struggle. He did struggle, and I don't think we're ever going to know quite why. I mean, he kind of told us why in the moment. George Floyd did.
Mhm.
He was freaked out about being put in the back of the police car. He's just had COVID. He's been in a police. He basically panicked about the sort of the claustrophobia of why all this kind of stuff. But it wasn't even taking the police version of that event kind of on its own terms. this wasn't some kind of like life and death struggle where he's, trying to attack them. He was basically pleading, like even that didn't really capture the fullness of what was happening there. But yeah, didn't didn't add in that he was completely subdued for almost 10 minutes, and the medical event was like pretty obviously tied at some level to like constricting his neck
Right.
for 7 or 8 minutes. And yeah, I mean, what if you wouldn't know that? Because clearly they weren't treating it like, up, just he died. Sorry, don't want to happen.
And not to mention that the struggle piece kind of drives me nuts because that's a refrain that we keep hearing, especially from those on the right when this happens, is like, well, just comply, do what they're telling you and you'll be fine. First of all, I mean, how many incidents have we seen where you can comply all you want? If they're ready to shoot you, they're ready to shoot you. That was the case with the 13-year-old boy that the video came out recently of him. He had his hands up when he was shot. So clearly, it's like that's not a fail safe approach. Not to mention, in the George Floyd case, when kind of the struggle occurred, it was what, three officers to him, 3 to 1. He was unarmed. He wasn't trying to be violent. He was just clearly freaked out. And you're
Yeah.
like, if the police don't have the capacity to deal with people who are panicking when they get arrested, something's pretty wrong because pretty much everyone's going to panic when they get arrested. I mean, my heart rate goes up when I go through security at the airport. So, like, we should probably have that pretty figured out by now. You should at least have the training to realize that most people aren't going to be cool, calm, and collected when they get stuffed into the back of a police car.
And as everybody says, proportionality.
Yeah.
It's not a capital offense, right? I mean, okay, you shouldn't do that. Maybe there are laws. There are laws against resisting arrest. I think it would be overcharging if George Floyd had not died and all that kind of stuff. Again, there's ways to deal with that. Killing the person is not not the way to do it.
Right.
Yeah, no, it is. And this is what a huge amount of the dialogue about police reform is about. Kind of how would you have, uh, how would the police have handled that if the job was get this to a peaceful conclusion where everyone's okay? And I guess that the defense did try with that kind of
Yep.
superhuman strength thing. And it's true. Floyd was a big guy, former athlete, worked as a, I guess, security guard, bouncer.
Hmm.
Um, but, 4 police officers, all armed, so I mean, there's, it is, it's a weird thing because I'm trying to say more than comes across probably in the words. But again, if the question was, how do you get this to a peaceful conclusion where no one gets hurt? Clearly, that's that's not the model that was being pursued there, and even one that would have even handled by the books, it probably wouldn't have been that. It's someone has already been sort of placed in the role of potential criminal. They haven't been totally compliant, and you see how these things work. We've seen it play out. The model is, subdue almost at all costs. I don't mean, that the actual intended plan is, use any level of violence. But it is interesting, from a reform point of view. Uh, and I would imagine this would be very different would probably go against a lot of police training. In that case, they're trying to arrest him, put him in the backseat of the car. He freaks out. The situation seems kind of unstable, but he's not armed. He's not armed. He's really not a danger to anybody. Maybe, theoretically he could have punched one of the officers, but you know, that's not a rationale for lethal force. Is it possible in a situation like that you kind of back up and say, okay, let's settle this down. We You're accused of something. We need to take you into arrest, but let's slow down. We're going to call someone who, the equivalent of sort of like a mental health person
Hmm.
to kind of talk everybody through it. I would imagine that is just not, that is not in line with even, correct police procedure. But if the goal is let's get everybody alive through this, maybe it should be.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a big part of this too is there's so much talk about how it's a difficult job and you want to give police the benefit of the doubt because they're dealing with people at their worst generally, and they're dealing with people who are potentially violent. And I think all that is super valid, but the flip side of that coin is when you're the police, the onus is on you. Your job is to de-escalate. It's not the person you're arresting, it's not their job to de-escalate. Like you say, obstructing your arrest is a crime, and that's not something you want to do. But there is one party who's the trained professional. So I think that's also why all this kind of talk about just comply, do what they say kind of rubs me the wrong way, because it's their job to keep the temperature low, or should be their job, which I don't know that it is right now, because for so long there's been kind of, it seems to be this warrior mindset instead of, a community partner mindset, which is why I think so much of this ends in violence. And, in Berkeley right now, the Berkeley City Council, I believe, just passed something instituting a new traffic enforcement department that will be kind of separate from the police and that will be unarmed. And the point of that is because so many of these incidents start with like really kind of low level things like traffic stops or like responding to a counterfeit $20 bill that escalate into a fatality when there's no violent crime that's happening. So I think that was kind of interesting to me looking at it from that vantage point, which is, I think it's muddied in the broad stroke conversation of, the police are dealing with violent people that have to make bad decisions. That's definitely true. But a lot of these cases are starting in decidedly non-violent situations that the police, are escalating, despite the fact that they're the ones who generally have the better firepower, who have backup, who should be, having some restraint in their dealings with them. But on the kind of congressional level of this, the kind of natural questions that were asked to lawmakers last night were, A, how do you feel about the verdict? B, what's the future of policing reform in Congress? And while most of the A's sounded very similar, even across the aisle, most Republicans said, the system worked the way it's supposed to, X, Y, Z. But on policing reform, we're essentially nowhere because, the Republicans proffer Tim Scott's policing bill that Democrats say is toothless and that does a lot to shield police officers from lawsuits and, accountability that way. And then, Republicans say that Democrats' offerings, which I think is called the George Floyd policing bill, is too harsh and too punitive against police officers. So,
What is just generally what is in that bill?
the
The
George
Democrats' reform bill, just broad, not, broadly speaking, what is included in it?
well,
What kind of things?
yeah, I mean, the big sticking point is the police impunity thing, that it would really kind of take a knife to that. And that is the thing that Republicans refuse to accept. But, I think great swaths of it are pretty innocuous, pretty more on the, body cam type level that you would think Republicans could agree on. But, it gets into what we were talking about last week, which is, as we saw from that one hearing we were talking about, when Republicans tend to take this absolutist position about policing, which is that, any way to hold them more accountable is a direct attack against the people who are in charge of keeping us safe. And how do you have a debate about that? Not to mention that the filibuster in its current form is pretty much ensuring that neither of those bills is going anywhere. So, it's we kind of have had this what feels to me like a watershed moment in American history, starting with the maybe the largest protest movement we've ever seen last summer, and then concluding with a police officer, being convicted of the top charge, which has a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. So, it's been this incredible sort of history altering moment that probably won't see absolutely no legislative change come out of it.
It's interesting. I mean, I do, there's a lot of these things. Even the qualified immunity thing is to a significant degree a judge thing,
Mhm.
not a statute thing.
Right.
And obviously, um, a lot of these things come down to juries. And this is the thing about people get frustrated about juries, but broadly speaking, you know, the issue with juries here is something that in general is a good thing and we should applaud. And it is in its current iteration, it's a fundamentally democratic, small d democratic thing. And what I mean by that is that uh, you can pass laws and say this is against the law, that's against the law, this is an exception to the law. But basically, the jury system means that a law cannot be greatly in tension with public opinion and public attitudes about what's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And, in general, that's a good thing. In this case, as we can see, it's not a great thing. But I do think that what is potentially I don't want to say a breakthrough, but a significant movement here is juries may start to see these matters differently. And that is probably a bigger deal because the law on its face can handle a lot of these cases. The charges get brought. Juries don't, don't tend not to go along. The point you were making before about when uh, people on the right say, "Hey, why didn't you just comply?" To kind of see it in equal terms. And you made the very good point that the police are the ones here who work for the state. They're responsible for following a set of rules. Um, sure, you are legally obligated to comply in almost every case with what a police officer tells you to do. You can work it out with a judge later whether the police officer was within their rights to tell you to do something. Um, but that is a legal obligation. But the key is that we already know the person being arrested is in the wrong. That's why they're being arrested. I mean, that's a given. That's a given that that is sort of baked into the interaction that the person being arrested is not is not following best practices, right? At least that's the assumption, or
Right.
else why are they being arrested in the first place? So, it's not an equal thing. The police officers have more obligations because they represent the state. State's supposed to follow the law. Um, and we're, kind of giving all these benefits of the doubt and allowing them to, at least temporarily take away people's liberty because they're doing things, they're doing things right. Having said all this, you know, I get it. Police officers, you get a call, you don't know what situation you're going into. There's the cases I imagine that are particularly unnerving are the ones sort of like spousal, kind of couple having a fight. You don't know what you're walking into there. Obviously, a very volatile situation. Who's armed? Who's not? Um, and let alone armed robbery in progress. Yeah, that's scary. I don't. And as you say, you catch people at their worst. They're probably at their worst because something just happened that they're in the process of being arrested. So that's all a given, and I don't take away for a second that that's a scary situation. It's an unstable situation, and even to the point we were saying before about these things that kind of someone's tags were out of date, and suddenly the person's dead 10 minutes later, right? It is certainly true. It's not common, but it does happen. Someone's tags are out of date. Well, it turns out that person is wanted in another state for like armed robbery. So for them, that kind of minor interaction is a ticket back to jail, maybe, and that person's going to come out shooting. You don't know. At a certain level, this is the job. This is the job. There are some inherent risks of it, and I don't want to. There's no point and there's no need to downplay that or deny that. You said before, Kate, that there is this kind of warrior mentality. There actually, and I think this came out about Minneapolis, although perhaps it's another city where there's been a number of these cases. There have been police unions that do these killology trainings or warrior mentality trainings, and basically they are these trainings. I think in most cases they're by the unions, not by the police departments themselves, but that do train police officers literally to sort of see each interaction as a sort of a life or death struggle.
Mhm.
You going to kill him or is he going to kill you? And we can say, even with being cognizant of the real risks of being a police officer, that man, if you're going into traffic stops and kind of like shoplifting or kind of passing a fake $20 bill with that kind of mentality, a lot of bad shit's going to happen. It's
Right.
just the whole thing has to be unwound.
Which I think, you can see that in how I think it's so shocking to a lot of Americans when you talk about other countries' police forces that aren't armed. That seems so foreign to us because the militarization of the police departments have, made them akin to a branch of the military. They've got so many guns and, just gigantic, some had like tanks and stuff,
Right.
or like armored cars and all this stuff. And you're like, the vast majority of what the police department is dealing with is what we've been talking about, low level stuff. A lot of it is traffic related. And I think you're completely right that if you come in kind of all ramboed up and with the mentality that this person is the enemy and I'm the soldier for America, of course that's going to end in a ton of these terrible killings because you're not going in with the mindset of like, how do I de-escalate? You're going in with the opposite mindset.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most of these cases certainly most of the cases that have gotten attention are cases with white officers and black people, usually black men. So the overlay of race here is a huge factor in this, and we've focused on what I guess I would call sort of structural dynamics that don't explicitly focus on race. Um, that is obviously a huge uh, you know driver of all these cases. But yeah, I don't know. The big thing in my mind is that even if you take that out of the mix or don't make that the central focus, you often have just an approach to policing where you're going to have a lot more tragic situations than you should.
Right.
And one point I want to make here, and this is, in a way, a defense of the police, or kind of like, uh, why can't we have policing where the police aren't armed? Well, a good reason is because we have a heavily armed civilian population.
Right.
Most of the countries where most of the countries where uh, most police don't carry sidearms or don't have them, kind of literally on, kind of holstered, ready to go, are cases where the police can assume very few people are armed.
Hmm.
And so, in a lot of ways, all of this is wrapped up in our gun culture, the broader culture of violence that is just endemic to America and has really always been endemic to America, even before you had um, quite the prevalence of firearms that you do now. And one thing that I have thought about recently about this is that if you go back to the 1990s, when you first had, assault weapons bans and the first examples of, background checks and stuff like that, the police unions were consistently backers of things like assault weapons bans and various kind of gun control things like that, right? And if you think about it, that's hardly surprising.
Right.
They want they want an edge in the use of force. They want to have more firepower. Even understand the police on the most cynical terms. Of course they want to have more firepower.
Right.
Who doesn't, right? And, to the extent that the whole kind of basis of the sort of modern theories of the state are a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, you don't just want a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, you want a lot more force than even illegitimate force.
Right.
But something happened over the last 20 years where police unions are no longer there politically. And the reason is, I mean, it's hard to imagine, it makes no sense that th- the position of police would have changed on this, but I think what it is that policing has become politicized, and police culturally, demographically, have become so much more on the right
Hmm.
and sort of part of that larger gun culture that they don't support restrictions on firearms for what are basically ideological reasons, even though they are, you know, demonstrably against self-interest in the context of policing. Police, again, just in that purely cynical wanting to monopolize lethal force, should want the whole population unarmed, but they don't.
Right.
And that gives you a sense of the dynamics of the last quarter century or so.
I think that's totally right. And so kind of linked into what we've been talking about too with the legislative side, the same way that the conversation around guns for Republicans has become absolutist, that any infringement at all is a brazen theft of liberty. It's the same thing with policing. Any infringement on police powers is a direct, hit to their safety and exactly what you're saying, kind of an ideologically loaded kind of rejection of people who they say, have very hard, very dangerous jobs, which is true. But it makes it impossible to have that conversation if that's how dug in the position is.
It's also worth saying here, and I don't have the precise statistics in front of me, but dangerous job, a lot of uncertainty, 100%. It's not the most dangerous job. It's not even close to the most dangerous job. Statistically, policing is not that high on the rating of dangerous jobs. Now, the ones that are more dangerous are pretty dangerous, like commercial fishermen, stuff like that. I mean, they're not, not for the faint of heart, but it is always important to tether the conversation to some statistical realities that case where, ordinary traffic stop, you don't know that the guy in the car is on the run from for multiple homicides, and he just comes out firing. That's rare. That's really rare. Happens. I'd be nervous about it,
Mhm.
but it's rare, and it's important to remember that.
Right. Okay, well, we have time for, I think, one reader question. Thank you to everybody who sent them in. We're gonna roll over some for future pods. So if your question doesn't get addressed this pod, it might in the future, and definitely keep sending them in.
Yeah, we got like 7 or 8 really good questions, didn't
Really
we? We
good.
got
Yeah.
yeah, so keep them coming.
Yeah. So I think today we're going to address a question about debt and the deficit, which has come up in especially in regards to these big, the COVID relief package, the infrastructure package, which are many, trillions of dollars, and a kind of resounding reaction to that has been, so I guess we don't care about the deficit anymore. It's been like a pretty shocking political shift to go from this, really intense austerity griping of the Obama era to where we are now, where Democrats are pretty much just not even, addressing the argument at all, which we've kind of talked about on former pods. But our question is, why can't Biden simply say in a major public address, Republicans were all for unlimited deficit spending when it was in support of Trump's huge tax breaks for big corporations and the richest 0.1% of Americans, which has been proven in every case never to have increased employment, improved the economy, or provided even the tiniest trickle down to ordinary taxpayers? Why is deficit spending or tax increases in support of critical infrastructure not worthy of their support, apart from it being what Democrats want? And the question is basically, why can't Biden just say that? Why can Democrats believe it but don't just put it out on the record publicly? So, Josh, you want to start with your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a good question, and I think the important thing to keep in mind, there is, we all of us political people, particularly in this very polarized age, have certain things that we see as just overwhelmingly obvious, but that not everybody thinks is overwhelmingly obvious, and um, that means that there is this desire to, if Biden just hit Republicans with a truth bomb like that in a nationally televised address, that would be some sort of transformative event, and they couldn't respond, and that would really shake things up. Uh, that's not really how it works. Um, I think, to the extent we're thinking along these lines, what is important is to, kind of boil that down to a few basic points. Republicans never care about the deficit when they're in charge. Uh, the deficit, we can run deficits, and that's okay. Maybe if you run deficits, it can actually create larger growth, which actually shrinks the deficits over time. What tends to be effective is having some key points like that you're just kind of coming back to again and again in a lot of different contexts, in small speeches and large speeches. That one statement in a big nationally televised thing, that that does not break through the way you think. It just doesn't work that way. And the people who push these ideas, often fake claims, they have rejoinders. They may not be good ones, but they do have rejoinders. Um, even the point that the listener made about, it's never been, kind of upper income tax cuts have never been shown to sort of boost growth. Well, that's not quite true. First of all, economics is not physics, right? You can have overwhelming consensuses but there's always someone who disagrees a little, and giving tax breaks to very wealthy people, that can have some minor effect on growth, or at least you can't prove it doesn't. But again, my big answer is the idea of one big speech that kind of shakes everything up. That's just, it doesn't work that way. Um, and it's easy for us to overstate how much messaging matters at all. But to the extent that it does, and it does to a limited extent, it's more consistency over time than one big thing.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. First, kind of in line with your point on the rejoinders to things like this, we do have some evidence that in 2020, Republicans constantly labeling Democrats up and down ballot as socialist had a negative political effect, particularly in Florida, particularly in Miami-Dade County, where you have a lot of Latin Americans, Latin American immigrants who have experienced socialism in a way that Americans haven't, and who associate that with violent regimes and everything like that. And the Trump campaign was actually laser focused on that kind of micro messaging. Um, in Florida, they had a YouTube ad running that falsely said the Maduro regime backed Biden's candidacy. There was pretty rampant misinformation efforts, especially on WhatsApp and other things that were heavily used by Hispanic people. And not to say that that should be a deterrent for Democrats, but we have seen that this Republican tagline has some political heft. So I do think that could be a good argument to kind of keep the big, not keep it under wraps, not keep it hidden, but maybe be a little, don't give Republicans such an easy target to say, big spending equals socialist, because we've seen that that can have some bad effects. And then the other piece of this is I think Biden and the Democrats so far have had experienced very little pushback to these big, gigantic packages that are really expensive, in part because even economists who are deficit hawks agree that we needed intense stimulus to keep the economic conditioning brought on by the pandemic from worsening. So to this point, we've pretty much had, putting aside maybe like right wing people on the fringes, but there's been a pretty broad agreement that we needed big spending. Republicans didn't go along with that, but experts, even on the conservative side of the spectrum, our former CBO director, Doug Elmenhorf, he said, we need at least $1 trillion of spending. So there was some agreement that kind of gave, I think, Biden and the Democrats a bit of cover, that everybody kind of agreed with that. Whether that will hold, unclear. Not to mention that our first big spending package also, was born in the cradle of the pandemic and resulting economic devastation. So I think we saw from Republicans largely failed attempts to kind of advertise against the COVID relief bill. It's really hard to make the argument, because we don't want to increase the deficit, we're not going to deliver help to people in a once in a generation pandemic. So I do think those factors have been present so far that have kind of, smoothed the way for Biden and Democrats to kind of get through with this big spending without having a lot of pushback. But, there has also been just a shift in the party, which is since the Obama years, in 2009, there were 14 Democrats who were from red states and more inclined to be on the more deficit hawky side of things. Since that breed has gone, almost extinct, that's why Manchin is such the center of the problem for Democrats right now. And I think with that shift where people retired or lost their reelections, you simply have fewer people who would truly earnestly identify as deficit hawks within the Republican Party. So, that's just kind of a dynamic that's undergirding, I think, the Democrat shift to the left, kind of underneath the rest of the political dynamics right now.
What you made a good point, and we can conclude on this about the fairly strong evidence that the socialism label, even though it's only embraced by a fairly small fraction of the Democratic Party, was pretty damaging to Democrats in certain focused constituencies, largely Latin American immigrant communities or recent immigrant communities that have historical experience or personal experience in autocratic governments. So, autocratic governments, socialist governments, Cuba, Venezuela, et cetera. One thing I think is always important to keep in mind, and it's easy to lose track of, is that it is two things. One is policy literalism. Democrats are I think uniquely vulnerable to this, and that is, well, here's the policy. It's obviously good for you. Why are you having a bad reaction to it? We said that this tax increase only applies to people vastly more well off than you. So what, you shouldn't care about that. Well, people don't people don't think in these kind of literal terms, and issues of trust in government play into that. There's, or kind of like, this assumption that if you people should react logically to what you say by your logic. And if they don't react logically, if you just say it louder, they'll get logical about it. Well, that's not that's and that socialism thing is a good example of that. Uh, these are people who associate socialism with uh, authoritarian, often violent regimes that may be socialist by certain aspects of their economic policy, but are a lot else. And you can explain to yourself that, well, no, socialism, what people like AOC or DSA people are talking about, is more like Scandinavian socialism, big safety nets, more heavy regulation, stuff like that. Well, yeah, but you got to be inside people's experience. That's not what everybody thinks. And a lot of people in the United States associate socialism as a sort of a kind of like a low energy version of what they had in the Soviet Union. That's just the reality. You got to operate within that reality. You can't, the fact that it's a misunderstanding, that can make you feel better about yourself, but that doesn't help. You need to operate within people's own experience.
Right.
That's just a political reality.
So
So that was I think
sending that in.
yeah, a very successful first version of our new listener question segment. I thought
Yes.
that was great. So
Yeah.
keep sending those questions in. Like I said, I think we got 7 or 8 this time, and because of the Chauvin verdict, we got to fewer of the questions than we would have liked. But as Kate said, we're going to roll some of them over, maybe do more questions in other episodes, but keep them coming, because I enjoy that, and you're the listeners. We're just two people, so it's not always perfect for us to come up with what we're gonna talk about and what we're gonna answer. You know better than we do. You're the listeners. You're the one who the show's for.
Right. And, also listener feedback related, I did just want to say we got some emails about my audio not being the best. And just to let everyone know, we're aware of that. I have, TPM sent me some good heavy duty audio equipment, and I just happened to be at my parents' house this week. But next week I'll be back at my apartment with a full audio setup. So if you're one of the people who's, hearing me a bit echoey or not crisp, clear audio that we want to deliver, just hang tight. By next week, our new technology is in place. We're gonna have all the kinks ironed out, and it'll be
Yeah, you'll have like Josh level audio quality.
if you can imagine
Yeah, there you go. There
it.
you go. All right. So let me remind everybody that the Josh Marshall podcast is brought to you by Grady's Cold Brew Iced Coffee. Great stuff. I've been drinking it for years. It's not just a product read for me. It's really great stuff. I enjoy it. Got a cup of it my eye in the cup right now. Anyway, that's Grady's Cold Brew Iced Coffee. You can get 25% off your first order at Grady'sColdBrew.com if you use the promo code TPM. That's Grady'sColdBrew.com with the promo code TPM, and you can pick it up in your grocery markets and other places you buy food and drinks. So give it a try.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Catch you later. All right. Bye-bye.